Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at another excellent book from the Legal Action Group. This one's on extradition. We've looked at it before and it's now in a new edition. The correct title is Extradition Law, a Practitioner's Guide, now in a second edition, and it's been written by Edward Grange and Rebecca Niblock. The Legal Action Group is known to all of us. It's the Access to Justice charity. Their books, I think, are right at the top end of the practitioners' list of books that we've got to have, depending on the areas of law that we practice in. But I'm delighted to welcome this new edition because of the importance that we have to attach today to the law relating to extradition in practice and how the procedures operate. The title that Elizabeth and I have given our review of this work is A Clear Explanation of Extradition Law with a Practical Approach for Practitioners, and that's what you get. Let's look at the book first of all. It's only a small book and it's a paperback. There it is. You see, there's the spine and then there's the back. Second edition, as I say. You've got a link as well to websites and various other things, but that's the book itself. You will notice there's a shaded area, and that shaded area actually is the main appendices, which I will show you. Appendix A being the first one, and you can see it's about 2/3 of the way through the book, and you can see the list of appendices, quite a large number, extremely helpful, checklists and so forth. What you do have right at the back is the index, which is paragraph numbered, so do be aware of that. And then if we go into the main book itself, this is the front of it here. Some detail about the authors on that side. Then you've got after that a very important foreword. Always worth reading the foreword to find out what's going on at the moment. This is written by Howard Riddle, who will be known to many of you. He has massive experience in this area. Then there's a preface, and then after that, that's from the two authors, and then acknowledgements. Then we get into the book itself, the content section, first class section. As I say, Nim Morphy gets a mention here for the huge amount of work he's put into this, and thank you, Nim, because I know how much work goes into the writing of these books. There's the content section again, and then after there are actually 12 chapters, and then you've got the various appendices, many of which are very important. Then you've got the case law, and do bear in mind that a lot of judges use this book. So I think it's very important to know your way around it in detail. Cases, then statutes there, then SIs, statutory instruments, then in European material, which is also very useful. Then what we have is the introduction. You see that there is a short index for each chapter, which is helpful to find things quite quickly. It is structured by paragraph numbering at the sides, and there are a lot of footnotes which assist again in trying to find things quickly. It deals specifically with the Extradition Act 2003 and the various things that have followed from there, including some of the more controversial things like the European arrest warrant. Then again, chapter 2, practical considerations, and then it runs through in that way. And as you can see again in the middle of the book, standard paragraph numbering and footnoting. It runs to 362 pages. It's an excellent book, and if you're involved in this area of practice, it's a book you must have. It's certainly the one that I believe, notwithstanding all the other materials available, it is the one, in terms of a hands-on approach, that the judges, the people who make the decisions, will actually rely upon. And it is very much the first and probably the only stop for a shop, if you like, when it comes to the actual information that's required. Depends very much on what you're doing at the lower court level, but in any event, it is a very important book, and one that I'm sure the judiciary would agree with me on, and that is it's absolutely indispensable. This is what we say anyway, because extradition is an emotive issue and it's an important one. Extradition, the ins and outs and rights and wrongs of it, and the consequent problems have been much in the news of late, and with increasing globalisation is becoming a commonplace issue. It's indicative then that there are now over 2,100 cases a year, at Westminster Magistrates Court, as opposed to less than 100 at Bow Street prior to 2004. The book, which has been published by the Legal Action Group and now in its second edition, has been compiled and written specifically for practitioners in mind. If you are a lawyer representing a person or persons fighting extradition proceedings, we think you'll find this book a useful and practical guide. It does actually have, as I say, everything as a one-stop shop. The two authors, Edward Grange and Rebecca Niblock, are both solicitors and experts in this field, and they point out that an extradition heard in the United Kingdom is not to determine guilt or innocence, which is for the courts in the requested state to determine. They also mention that, quote, most requested persons are eventually extradited, and I think that's something to bear in mind. Because of the nature of extradition, as discussed in the book's introduction, this is an area in which clients, not surprisingly, need swift and immediate help, so it's useful that the book has been written with the duty solicitor in mind, because just think for one moment, if you've been involved as I have, the huge pressures on the duty solicitor. So this sort of book does make our lives a lot easier, and I do thank LAG in particular for the work they do in this area. It does make our lives simpler. Writing in the foreword, I've mentioned Howard Riddle. He's the Senior District Judge, Criminal Cases at the Westminster Magistrates Court, and he summarises the most conspicuous benefits of the book. It's valuable advice on how the court works, what judges expect, and the main arguments that can be raised against extradition. And I think that's again important, because do remember the judge. They hear the same old story every time, and it gets a bit repetitive, frankly, and that's one of the reasons why some of them have a relatively short fuse. Now, I think that what Howard Riddle has produced here is very good common sense, getting to the nub of the issue on each occasion, because really that is the key to the success of your case if you're making an application submission. So whilst the bulk of the book concerns extradition law within the European Union, there is also a separate chapter which deals with extradition requests from countries outside the EU. Here all relevant issues are raised, including challenges to extradition, which are discussed in detail in chapter 5. All this is delivered in one compact volume. It's not a big book at all, which is quite an accomplishment, we think, on behalf of the authors, who've done a sterling job, and of course the Legal Action Group itself. Speaking of convenience, the book is extensively footnoted, as I've indicated, with numbered paragraphs, useful boxed sections and flowcharts, plus a detailed table of contents and an index. Also, there are some 24 pages consisting of tables of cases, statutes, statutory instruments, and European and international material. And for those bemused by abbreviations, these are also deciphered in full. Now let me conclude by saying, and welcoming this new edition, by saying, as it covers all amendments to the Extradition Act of 2003, which came into force, you will recall, in 2013 and 14, the new edition should be considered an essential purchase by all counsel and solicitors acting within what is a highly pressured area in terms of realities of extradition proceedings. And the publication date is cited at July 2015. As I've said, I can't speak too highly of the LAG publications. I go into most courts, and that's what I see on the desk when you go in. They've got them. Human rights in Part 2 cases, there we go. Get a lot of detail here. European Court of Human Rights. Right in the middle, Article 2, right to life, Article 3, prohibition of torture. So there are a lot of issues. If you've done any of these cases, I've done only a few, but if you have done them, you'll be aware very quickly that you really have got to be up to speed. Extradition offence is another area, very important. Just one last thing on the appendices. You can see the detail that goes into the appendices here. Here we go, the CPS matters there. And then you've got application forms and so forth there. Then the directives are mentioned too. All in all, I think this is an excellent book. It's not expensive either. That's another good thing with the Legal Action Group. They do pride themselves as being the access to justice charity. I think we as practitioners would have a very difficult job to do without having the expertise and the service, because that's what they're giving us. They're giving us a service, putting everything together, and again, they've come up here with a first-class book. Thank you anyway to all concerned. It makes our lives a lot easier. That includes the judges, the lawyers, and I think the actual participants, the clients, because they do need to have it explained to them as well. So thank you. Bye-bye.